Today we're in East Anglia, visiting one of the many shows organised in 2003 to celebrate the centenary of Harley-Davidson motorcycles, the Milwaukee Marvel. So while we take a closer look at some of the Harleys here, I want to go back and look over the 100 years Harley-Davidson motorcycles have been in production and try to find out what made them so great in a world where so many other manufacturers failed. So let's go back and see how it all started, and I've managed to find some old photographs that help illustrate this great story. Towards the end of the 19th century in Europe, as well as in the USA, bicycle racing became a popular sport. This led to bicycles fitted with small engines competing against each other, which was shortly followed by specially built bikes that growl from their big, slow-turning engines, filling huge velodromes to the delight of enthusiastic crowds. The popularity of the sport led to companies in the USA announcing their intention to produce motorcycles for the general public, and in 1899, the first to put a model on the market was the Waltham Manufacturing Company, Massachusetts. It was called the Orient Aster and was powered by a French Didion type engine. More companies followed their example, and soon the floodgates for more machines was open. William S. Harley and Arthur Davidson were both sons of families who had emigrated to America from Great Britain. Harley was born in 1880, Davidson was a year younger. They became boyhood friends and eventually found themselves both working in the same small metal fabricating plant. Two versions of how the pair moved into the development of gasoline engines. One tells of them experimenting on power plants for small boats, while another said their interests were purely towards powering bicycles. However, in 1901, William completed blueprints for an engine designed to fit on a bicycle. In 1902, Walter Davidson, Arthur's brother, also offered his help to the pair, and by 1903 the first Harley-Davidson prototype was built, which on testing reached a disappointing top speed of only 25 miles per hour. The engine lacked power for hill climbing, and on the muddy, rutted roads of Milwaukee the frame showed many signs of weakness, as did the steering. So more power was obviously needed, and William Harley set about designing a new and larger engine. Once these plans were complete, Arthur made up the casting patterns. This new, more powerful engine was fitted again to a pedal cycle frame, and again it was not strong enough to support it, breaking and buckling. So Harley and Davidson agreed that a new frame had to be constructed, brazed from heavy gauge tubing, with a lengthened wheelbase to allow for a loop to house the engine case just ahead of the pedal bracket. The fuel tank was placed on the top tube, and to give the bike balance, the tool case and battery box was positioned strategically on the frame. The forks were of course unsprung, but were built from extra heavy tubing. The drive was by a leather belt. Fitted as a primitive clutch was a spring-loaded pulley, used as a tension device bearing against the lower run. This was activated by a hand lever when a momentary halt was expected. It also helped the rider to get started again when he or she would have to vigorously pedal, while at the same time manually tightening the belt. The wheels too were more sturdy. Other manufacturers used bicycle wheels, which had a short life, especially while used with an engine. Harley had designed his own heavy-duty type with large hubs and heavyweight bearings that had a far better endurance, especially if well greased. So all the hallmarks of later Harley-Davidson motorcycles was here in the second prototype, with its heavy, sturdy, rugged construction and more powerful engine. Right from the beginning it had been decided by the two partners that the new machine would be called Harley-Davidson. Harley's name was first in recognition of his concept of the overall design and of his tireless work in producing the prototype. It was also accepted that Harley-Davidson sounded far better than Davidson-Harley. It might seem strange now, but while the development of the prototype was progressing, both Harley and Davidson were still working to keep paying their day-to-day living expenses, and neither had anything like sufficient capital to begin commercial production of their newly designed motorcycle. William C. Davidson, Walter's father, now steps in. As a carpenter, he built a 10 by 15 foot wooden shed in the backyard of the family home. In this was housed the second-hand lathe and drill press. On the door was painted Harley-Davidson Motor Co. Not a very auspicious start for what turned out to be a giant in the ranks of American motorcycling history. And at this point, the company was launched, albeit with no cash and no orders. Harley decided for the betterment of future projects he should expand his training in automotive engineering. Although he had a natural talent, he knew he would be better able to develop his ideas faster if he had a more formal background to the subject. Consequently, in the latter part of 1903, he enrolled in the engineering department of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Here he paid his expenses by waiting on tables and accepting small engineering jobs. While Harley was at university, Davidson, with the help of a small part-time staff, started to assemble by hand the first of the motorcycles built to order with the Harley-Davidson name. If he had a technical problem, Harley was called in to advise, and during the last months of 1903 2 motorcycles were completed, the parts and assembly being financed by charging half the purchase price as a deposit with the balance on delivery. In 1903 too, C.H. Lang of Chicago became the first Harley-Davidson dealer, selling one of the first 3 production machines ever made. By the spring of 1904, more orders followed as motorcycle enthusiasts heard of the strength and reliability of the first few models. Soon, Walter Davidson was able to quit his job and devote his full time to building motorcycles. In 1905 too, another milestone was reached when a Harley-Davidson motorcycle won a 15-mile race in Chicago. One of the major problems that now faced Harley-Davidson, as it did the rest of the motorcycle industry, was that of front suspension. Some solved the problem using cartridge-type forks. Harley's answer was different. He doubled up on the forks. The back ones were to remain solid, or rigid, while the ones in front were sprung. They were linked together at the bottom to form a pivot. This simple method was fine at lower speeds, but later it was to have drawbacks. As speeds increased, handling could become difficult, and the slightest misalignment could cause a dangerous wheel wobble. As this double fork suspension design was to be used for nearly 40 years, as a topic of conversation, it was to become quite controversial amongst Harley-Davidson enthusiasts. By now the size of the shed had already doubled, but it was soon realised that if the company was to expand, a proper factory was needed, and they found an ideal site in the industrial area of Milwaukee. But how to finance the purchase? Scared to borrow from banks at high interest rates, luck smiled on the partners when James Maclay, a relative of the Davidsons, agreed to loan them the money they required to buy the land at the corner of the 27th and Chestnut Street. This also was adjacent to a spur line of the Chicago, Milwaukee and St. Paul's Railroad. Later, the Chestnut Street name was changed to Juneau Avenue, which of course became known worldwide as the home of Harley-Davidson. On the new site, a 2-story building was erected, and by the close of 1906, 49 motorcycles had been completed, and the nickname Silent Greyfellow was coined. With sales now increasing, Arthur was able to leave his job at last and concentrate on sales, and during 1907 they tripled, reaching 152 machines sold over the year. There was also sporting success too, 4 trophies being won for hill climbing, the Flying Start, 5-minute handicap, and for a special handicap Derby Day race. In 1908, the problem facing Harley-Davidson was how to improve their sales and marketing. The founders felt the building of a strong retail dealers organisation was necessary to support the output of their future mass production plans. Arthur started to look into how other companies were developing their marketing. He found Indian, Pope and George N. Pierce Co. had already built up vast sales networks and suggested Harley-Davidson follow their example.